Perek Vov, Mishnah Aleph. This Perek deals again with the theme of Hoitzah, which we introduced in the first Perek, and of course we mentioned in the fifth Perek. We mentioned in the first Perek that a person is not allowed to carry from a Rishus HaYochid to a Rishus HaRabim, or to a Rishus HaRabim to a Rishus HaYochid, nor is a person allowed to carry Daled Amos in a Rishus HaRabim itself. Now this Perek is going to be discussing not so much the Isuri D'Oraisa, but the Isuri D'Rabbanon. Certainly in the first Mishnah, we're going to be discussing things which a woman can and cannot go out with wearing on Shabbos. Any malbush, any cloth items, or indeed any tachshit, any jewelry, a woman, indeed a man as well, is allowed to go out with on Shabbos. But anything which is not a malbush or tachshit is considered a problem, and is considered a masa, and therefore carrying that on Shabbos is also. In addition to all of that, Chazal made certain takonas that a person shouldn't go out with something which, in the eyes of Chazal, they would feel it likely they may take it off inadvertently and show their friends, or something which might sort of slip off and they might come to carry, etc. So the Mishnah is going to give various examples. Interestingly, the Tiferes Yisrael notes that the order is interesting, is strange. The fifth Perek discusses Bameh Behema Yotzah. First of all, we discuss the behema, and then in this perek we start talking about human beings. Bameh Isha Yotzah. Why that order? So the Tiferes Yisrael notes that the first, we're talking in really a chronological order. The first thing to go out is going to be the animal. The cow would go out first thing in the morning. Later in the day, a human being would go out. So since chronologically the animal, the cow, would go out earlier, therefore it starts off in the fifth perek Bameh Behema Yotzah, and only later the sixth perek talks about an Isha. But there is actually another difference between the two parakim, a subtle difference, but the Mefarshim pick up on it. The first Mishnah of the fifth perek says Bameh Behema Yotzah or Bameh Ein Yotzah. Two questions: with what can an animal go out with on Shabbos, and with what can it not go out with on Shabbos? Two questions. And then it says, Yotzeh, and it goes on and explains what it can go out with on Shabbos. But yet, in our Mishnah, the Mishnah says, Bameh Isha Yotzah or Bameh Ein Yotzah, the same two questions. And then it says, Lo Seitzeh Isha, etc., etc. She shouldn't go out with this. So why is it that in our Perek, we have the same two questions, but we start off by saying she should not go out with such and such items, but yet when it comes to the Behema, it says, Yotzeh should go out. So the Tiferes Yisrael says, interesting answer, I'll be Jewish if you like, that the Tana wanted to stress Kol Kavudas Bas Hamelech Penima, that a Jewish wife should try and find her place, the paradise of her own home, and she shouldn't be running around, and therefore she should, to stress this point of Kol Kavudas Bas Hamelech Penima, we say Lo Seitzeh first before what she can go out with. Okay. Now, says the Mishnah, Bameh Isha Yotzah or Bameh Ein Yotzah. With what can a woman go out with, and with what can she not go out with? Lo Seitzeh Isha, Lo B'chutei Tzemer, V'lo B'chutei Pishton, V'lo B'ritzua Shebereisha. A woman shouldn't go out with various types of head decorations, some straps, Chutei Tzemer, woolen threads, and Chutei Pishton, linen threads, and other forms of straps in her hair. And she shouldn't be toivel with these threads, these straps in her hair, until she loosens them. The reason being that if a woman needs to go to the mikveh, she cannot have anything which is a chatzitza, which is an intervention between the water and herself. And therefore these straps would be a chatzitza for her. So in order for her to go to the mikveh, she would need to loosen them. But the Mishnah says, Lo titbol bohen asher terapim. And the concern is that even on Shabbos, if she needed to go to the mikveh, then the concern is she might actually take them off, and she might come to carry on Shabbos itself. So Chazal made a takana that a woman shouldn't go with these threads on Shabbos in a Rishus HaRabim, because we're worried that maybe she'll come to take them off when she goes to the mikveh on Shabbos, if she happens to go to the mikveh on Shabbos, and she might come to carry in a Rishus HaRabim. And of course it would apply as a low plug to any age of woman, whether a woman is even a lot of mikveh age, too young or too old or whatever it is, the takon of Chazal would still stand. Furthermore, says the Mishnah, V'loi b'toitefes, a woman shouldn't go out with a toitefes. A toitefes is a form of sort of a headband which goes from one ear to the other ear, made out of metal, and it's a form of decoration. V'loi b'sanbutin, nor should she go out with sanbutin, which the Bar Tanura says is tzeluyim b'toitefes. There's sort of decorations hanging from the tzitz, like the headband going across her forehead. She shouldn't go out with that. And the Bar Tanura points out that the sanbutin, women would have different types. The Bar Tanura says, aniyos, oisos, oison shal minitzivoin. They would make them out of sort of coloured material. And ashiras oisos, oison shal kesef shal zohov. But wealthier women would make them out of metal and would make them out of silver and gold. The concern is, and since these decorations are considered important, our concern is that the woman might take them off and show them to her friends and therefore carry in a Rishus Harabim. But, qualifies the Mishnah, that is only bisman she'enon tefurin, when they're not sort of sewn in. Once they're sewn in, then it's okay. So there are different ways of learning this. One way of learning this is that a woman would be wearing some sort of head covering, some sort of hat, and if the toitefes or the sanbutim are stitched into the hat, then she can wear that on Shabbos, no problem. The only concern of lo yes, she shouldn't go out with these things, is bisman she'enon tefurim, when they're not stitched in. Why? What's the svara? The svara is pashut, that a married woman obviously cannot uncover her hair in public, and therefore there is no concern of her taking off her hat in public, and if these things are stitched in with it, therefore there's no worry that she'll take them off. The Rambam, however, learns differently. He says that we're not worried that a woman might take these things off on Shabbos. Rather, the Rambam says that they're sort of they're stitched into each other. Bisman she'enon tefurin means when they're sort of independently tied. If, however, they're tied to each other, the sanbutin and the toitefes are tied to each other, then we're not worried that she's going to just take them off, not to show her friend, but because they're just too heavy. And if, however, they're sewn together, there is no fear that a woman might it might fall off, and she might pick them up. But independently, if they're not sewed into each other, then there is a concern they may fall off, and then she should not go out with these items independently, at either toitefes or sanbutin. But if they're stitched to each other, then we're not worried that they might fall off. Continues the Mishnah. V'lo b'chovel, and she shouldn't go out with a chovel l'rishus harabim. What is a chovel? It seems to be some sort of cloth which she would put underneath this toitefes to protect her head. A toitefes is a piece of metal, and if you put it flat against the forehead, it might hurt her. So therefore she would wear some sort of cloth, a sort of cap underneath it, which is decorative. And indeed, the Bar Tanura points out, b'chobel, he says, chaticha shel beged, kamoy mitznefes, like a sort of a headchief, a handkerchief, katana shekoshu noiso ala metzach, that it ties on her forehead, v'noisin hatzitz oleh, and you put this headband on top of it, kadei shelo yazik hatzitz b'meitzach, that the tzitz won't damage her forehead, and sometimes she would actually wear it even without the tzitz. So in and of itself, it is actually decorative. Now, the Mishnah says the dafka b'rishus harabim. So the Mefarshim discuss what is this coming to exclude. The Bar Tanura says ava b'chotze shari, but to wear these things in the chotze and not in the rishus harabim, that would be permitted. And the Bar Tanura continues, all the aforementioned items, asurim af b'chotze, they're even osa in the chotze. Why? The gozabuhu shelo tiskashet b'Shabbos klal. Chazal made a gezer, she should not wear these items at all on Shabbos, lo b'chotze v'lo b'rishus harabim, neither in the chotze nor in the rishus harabim. However, v'kabul itiru, with this sort of headkerchief, that would be mutzah. Why? We don't want to prohibit all her decorations. And she might not be attractive in the eyes of her husband. So we want to make sure that some items she can still wear. However, the Rambam argues and says that the Rishus Harabim kulahu, that the Rishus Harabim is going on all the items. The Rambam says that we're dealing with the Rabbanans here. and therefore the concern is specifically she might remove these items in a Rishus Rabbim, but all of these items in a Chotzer would be permitted. Carries on the Mishnah. V'loi be'ir shazahav. A woman mustn't go out with an ir shazahav. This was a very nice decoration, where again it's a form of headband that sits, she would wear a cross, but it had the tzura, the appearance of Yerushalayim, the walls, etc. of Jerusalem, carved out in it. V'lo be'katlo. A katlo was, I think the English word is a choker, where she would wear some sort of tachshit, which was against her neck. And the Baratanura says, tachshit shenosim b'tzavor b'doichik. She would tie it very tightly. She would literally strangle herself. She would put it very, very tight, to show that she's quite plump. Which I guess times have changed, but in those days she would want to give the appearance that she's quite plump, and that would be attractive. And she would tie it tight in order to show this. V'lo b'na zomim. A woman should not go out with nose rings. V'lo b'tabas she'ein oleh chosim. Nor with a ring which does not have a signet on it. The men would go out with rings which did not have a signet, which had a signet. That's what the men would wear, in those days. But a woman, for a tabas which has a chosim, that's not a tachshit for her. And if she would go out with a tabas which has a chosim, that's actually an issa d'oraisa for her. But if she would wear a ring which does not have a chosim, that's a drabonon. And similarly, v'lo b'machat she'en nekuva, nor with a needle which hasn't got an eye in it. In those days, the woman would wear there'd be a long needle, and there'd be sort of a piece at the top, and they'd use it sort of to part their hair. But on Shabbos, they would sort of slot it into their turban, to their head covering, and they shouldn't go out with that on Shabbos. Ve'im yotza, and if she would go out with it on Shabbos, ein chayeves chatos, then she would not be liable for a chayev chatos. Why? Says the Baratanura, ha'isha b'chol hanach. With all of the aforementioned items, ad the asrina that we asked, ad hocha masnisin ein chayeves chatos. In all of these situations, if she did go out on Shabbos with these things, she would not be chayev chatos. To kulo tachshitin inu. As long as she's wearing them, they're considered tachshitin. The Rabbanon made the gezerah. Maybe she would take it off and show her friends. That is the end of the first Mishnah of Perek Vav.